Hello, hello, hello. Good evening. We are here with Faith in Motion. My name is Ariel Brown, and I'm coming to you with the third episode. Yes, for number three, right? So, as the title says, it says vision is revealed as your life speaks. And so, what I'm going to say today, let's talk really quickly uh, for Genesis chapter 12, verse 1. Just to give you a little background to the story, Abram, before his name became Abraham, God called him to leave his kinder, to leave his family, the people that he knew, to leave the land where he was born, to leave his father, to leave his parents, to leave everything behind and go to the land in which God would show him where it was and for him to set heel, right? So if you know anything about Abraham, or Abraham as his name was changed later, God used him, but he became the father of faith. That's what we know him as. That's what it speaks on in Hebrew, in the book of Hebrew, right? Chapter 11, it talks about him being known as the father of faith by him dying before he could see where the promise was. God told him that he would be the father of nations and that his wife was the mother of nations. He asked him to look up to see if he could count the number of stars, and he said he couldn't. And he told him that would be his nation, the people, right? And so, as we think about Abram's life and his legacy and what was left behind, his children, right? He had Ishmael before, he wasn't the promised son that God told him that would come through his wife, right? So all these things happened, and then he had to sacrifice his promise, the gift that God gave him, the blessing, right, out of him being obedience. He had to sacrifice that, and he did willingly. He said that God would provide the ram, and God did. God would provide it. He provided the ram in the bush for him, so he didn't have to slay and kill his son. But let's talk about it though, the obedience that he did. So faith in motion is walking in the obedience, walking in the gift and the promises that God said, whether you can see it or not. So when he went to the land in which God would show him, when he left, he took his nephew, his brother's son with him, right? Lot. Granted, he wasn't supposed to take him, but he did. He took him with him. But what happened out of the obedience? That's what we're talking about. That's what faith in motion is living out what God told you to do, living out the assignment, living out the walk, the vision that you was presented with, that God showed you, whether it was a dream or whether you had an open vision. So looking like I am right now to you, and God is showing you this vision, right? He's giving you this assignment to live out. And sometimes all we can do is see it, or all we can do is hear it, but we have to believe. And so Abraham was put into a place where he had to just trust the word of God, what God's word told him to do, what God personally said to him. He had to just trust that. That's all he went on with, was his word, was to get up and leave, to go into the land in which I would show you. That was the word, that was it, and that's all he had. That's all he had to move forward with. But he got up, he got his wife, he got his nephew, and he did grab some things, right? And some of the people that was in his home with him, right? Some of his workers, he grabbed them and they left to the land. And when they made their bed, right? So when they finally hit the land and where God would show them, and they stayed there for a while, then God began to talk to them even more, do some things happen. I encourage you to read up on Abraham and to really let it marinate. So sometimes we have to walk without seeing the vision presented in front of us. Sometimes we just get the word and we have to move and be obedient, right? We have to just move. Sometimes he doesn't show us where to go. He just tells us to go. Can we trust that he tells you to go and that you would just do it? So if I had to mirror this story after my own life, what happened to me, right? So I came down here to Texas before I didn't even know that this is where I was going to go. I came down here to Texas because I was on an assignment. God had me to do something. And so I came here being obedient for the assignment and sitting in Texas. I remember being driven because I was with a friend of mine and she was taking me around, showing me different places in different areas where she go to hang out and where the best food was. And she showed me. And as she was driving to the destination that we were going to, I heard God say, prepare yourself to move here because this would be your home. And I looked and, I looked around and I was like, okay, Lord, I hear you. And then I told my friend and I said, God just told me to prepare myself because this is home. This is where I'm going to call my home. He didn't tell me when I was moving. He just said, prepare. And so she was like, oh, I heard the same thing too. And so when she said that, I was like, okay, God, I don't know what you're doing. But I said, yes, anyway. And me not knowing too much about Texas, yes, I was born in Houston, Texas, where I currently reside, right? I was born here, but I only stayed here for a little girl up until I was about 2 years old. And then my parents moved back to the East Coast, right? So not knowing nothing about this place, not having any family here. All I went on was the word that was given to me. All Abraham or Abe, all he went on was the word that God gave him. So I ask you to go on the word. If all you have to walk on it, if all you have to believe is a word that God gave you, would you move and step out in obedience? Do you realize that you don't know what's on the other side of your obedience? You don't know what it's going to look like. You don't know what it's going to sound like, what it's going to smell like, what it's going to taste like. You don't have any answers, but all you have is a word of promise, that he said to just do this thing. He's just giving you a word. And sometimes we have to run with the word, whether it sounds believable or true or not. But if you believe in your heart that God gave it to you, if you know his voice and that's him speaking to you, it's not your own thoughts, it's not your own mind. You didn't say it to yourself. And truth be honest, for me, Texas was never on my radar. I began to talk to God and tell him, Lord, that this can't be life. It has to be something better for me. But never once was I looking at Texas. I was looking to go to Atlanta. I had already did my research on Atlanta. I knew what was out there, and I was excited. I was like, oh, okay, God, I'm gonna go and check that out because that's where my heart was. Truthfully, to go to Atlanta because I do here, right? So I know, okay, I can go there. That is one of the capitals, one of the it for here. I know I can go make a name out for myself there. I can do something that I'm already been gifted with, skilled with to do. So that was a perfect move for me. Never once did I think about coming from the East Coast all the way down south. Again, that wasn't my radar, but I knew that if I go here, Lord, I could do this. I had those conversations like, well, Lord, if I go here, oh, well, maybe, or if I go here. So when I got the move to come to a place that I know nothing about, that I only know one person in, okay. And and yes, I know this person, but she's still, still new to me. So she's still a stranger, but she's not a stranger, right? So I know I've been knowing her for a year, but I really don't know her, all of her, right? So, but the connection that God made between me and her before then, was supernatural. So I said, okay, God, I'm gonna just go for it. And then when I got back home after leaving here, so I left here with knowing that I was supposed to come back, but I just didn't know when. A month went by, right? I had the word, but a month went by. And I said, okay, God. I was asked again, I was asked by my friend. She was like, okay, so have you set a time? Have you set a date? Did you do this? Did you do that? I didn't do any of it. Nothing, but all I knew was I had the word. And in my mind, it was like, okay, God is going to tell me when, he's going to show me what to do. And so as soon as I had got off the phone with her, I prayed. I did what I knew best. I prayed. I said, okay, God, if this is where you would have me to be, if this is where you want me to go to, then God, can you give me a date? When should I be there by? And then he gave me the date. And the date was 2 months. Okay. I prayed to God on the 7th of May. I got the date shortly thereafter, maybe about a few days after. And so it was literally 2 months to the time he had answered me that I had to get ready. I had to prepare. Now, mind you, he told me back in March that I had to prepare because this would be my home. But I went back home and I didn't prepare. I just knew I had this word, but I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't know what else I needed to do. So when it came time for me to start the process to prepare to get myself as ready as I could be to move in 2 months, then I had to ask God for different things. So remember, he gives you the word. And we're talking about how your life can exemplify the faith that you believe in God from the word that he gave, the vision that he gave to you, whether it was by word or what you see, how your life can walk this thing out, can speak on your behalf, because some people know God or come to know God from how you live and what you believe about God. They'll see the God in you, right? So with that being said, literally people seen the faith that I had because I just left. And I left at a time that nobody would have left because of what was going on with the world. But I had to trust that that's what God said. And even though the pandemic hit, even though the whole world stopped and everything was uprooted and it was just uproar and nobody knew their next, didn't no one know whether they were coming and going, didn't no one know whether they were going to be alive, if they had a job or not. People were losing their jobs. People had no money. Things weren't being available. Things were being scarce. I still left. At that time. I took me and my children and I left. And all I was given was a word. Then I was provided 2 months later with the actual date that I had to be here by. Then I started putting some things in order, and I was asked a question, well, what you going to do? I don't know. Well, where you going to live? At that moment, I didn't know. And all I knew is that God had told me I had to move. I had to come here. So I had to believe what he said and just walk in it, in my obedience. So my life was speaking for itself, right? It did. It spoke for itself because I got up and left in the middle of a pandemic. I left in July of 2020, right? I got up and I left. The world shut down and closed in March. And then I got up in July and I left. And I took me and 3 boys. And I came down to a state that I knew nothing about. And I only knew one person, period. I didn't know where I was going to work. I didn't know at that time where me and my kids would live. Me and my kids left in a vehicle. But after the week of us being here, we had to return it back because we were renting from Enterprise, right? So no vehicle. I only have a sum of cash. And after paying and doing everything that I needed to, that cash was going to run out because I didn't have a job to come down here. I just came down here on a word and a date. That was it. With 3 boys. That was it. But I trusted my father enough to just get up and go. Now I'm here. It's going on 3 years that me and my kids have been here. Has it been peachy cream? No. Has things happened? Yes. But has God made good on his promises? He has. Did some people tell me that I was nuts, or they didn't understand, or they assumed that I left for other reasons? Yes. But in the midst and in this process, I'm going off of a word and a date. That's all I knew. And all I had was faith enough to believe he gave me the word. Then when I got down here, and as I was driving to get here, God then began to show me other things. And he began to speak other words over my life and over my boys and told me some things that was going to happen because I went on the word and I trusted him. And even as I was driving, I said, well, God, I don't know what this is going to look like. I didn't know that us driving, was going to take us 2 days to get down here, 2.5 days. That's the time span that it took for us to get down here. And even with driving and being tired, because I'm only stopping to get gas, or I'm only stopping to sleep here and there for a couple of seconds and then getting back on the road, and dealing with 3 boys, 2 teenagers, and one that wasn't a teenager at that time. So I'm coming down on this word. My kids asking me questions that I didn't have the answer to. All I kept telling them was, I trust God. And anything else that we need, He's going to provide. That takes it to the next part of Abram's story, when he had to sacrifice his son that God promised, right? The seed that He told him that was coming through his wife, and it did. He got that promised seed. He bore that son through his wife. And then he was told to sacrifice his son, right? To sacrifice his son. And all he said was God would provide. He didn't know how the ram was going to show up. He didn't know whether or not God was going to give him anything to take in place over his son. But all he knew, again, that he went off of this word. He trusted God. So if God needed him to sacrifice his seed, that's what he was going to do. So sometimes we have to sacrifice some things that we consider our precious joy, our peace, right? Oh God, I don't want to give up. That's the business. I've been doing this business. I've had this business for 10 years. It's been really, really good to me. Or God, I don't want to leave my family or the only job I've ever known. Or, God, I don't want to walk away from this or that, whatever that may be. But He's telling you to give it up anyway, to trust Him, to give it up, because He wanted to see whether or not Abram was going to do it. And when he did, God told him, now I know that you truly believe me. Now I know that you do. And so He provided the ram in the bush. And then he was able to sacrifice that ram instead of his son. But he had to go off again a word that God told him what to do, a command, because it was a command. He told him to do this thing. When God tells us or shows us a vision or different things He say do, that's a command. It's not up to us to think about whether or not we want to do it. We have to be obedient. And out of our obedience is how we show God that we love Him. Out of our obedience tells God that we love Him. Out of our obedience can have other people come to know the Father that you serve, the God that you believe in, just because you were obedient to say the thing, or you were obedient to do the thing, or you trust God, or somebody that you didn't know gave you a word and you were like, oh my God, that sounds crazy. It doesn't make no sense. But you knew it wasn't coming from them, and you knew it wasn't coming from yourself. I knew when God told me to come down to Texas, Lord, I could go somewhere else. That's all I kept saying was, Lord, my heart, my mind, never once was Texas on my radar, but He had a better plan for me and a purpose. And now me being here, my kids were exposed to things and opportunities that they would have never had I stayed stuck and still in the same place, or say, God, you didn't say that. And you can't do one part of what God told you and not the other. You have to complete the whole assignment. So if all He gives you is the word, take that word and run with it until He tell you, now do this, now do that. So when I was in Austin, because we went to Austin first. So when I was there, okay, God, different things was happening. I had an excitement. God promised me 3 things would happen by me coming down to Austin. He gave me 3 things, and He told me the order in which it was going to come. The order in which it was going to come. He said I would get a job, I would get a car, and I would get a house. He gave me 3 things. I got a job, I got a car, and I got a house. All 3. Okay? That was a promise He made to me. And he even took it a step further. The car that I got was fully paid in full. He just told me I would get a car. He didn't tell me that it was going to be paid in full. He didn't tell me where I was going to get the car from, how it was going to come. He had just promised me these 3 things. And the car was paid in full. It came from my church, but it was paid in full. But that was a promise that He made to me out of the obedience. When I say, yes, I'm coming. Then me and my boys, we lived in a hotel for a year and a week. And when He promised the house, I didn't know where we were going to live. I had started looking for other places. I started looking for houses. I was looking for apartments. I was looking for duplexes. I just started looking. I know He told me I would get a place, but I started looking. And I was putting in applications and doing this and doing that, and things were not panning out. I said, well, God, I'm going to hold off on a minute because I was getting so many no's. And I was like, okay, Lord, I'm going to stop looking. And so I stopped looking for about 2 weeks. And then I had a conversation with a friend of mine. And I was telling her about the concern because I knew that I had overstayed my welcome. That's where I felt like where we stayed at, the people didn't treat us bad. The people that stayed in the other hotel rooms next to us, adjacent from us, all of that, we had no problems where we stayed. But again, I just knew it was over. We had overstayed our welcome there. So I was ready to go. And then God made good on his word again. He told me, I started looking, and I found a real estate agent. And I said, okay, Lord, I had these houses narrowed down. And I was like, okay, God, I need you to tell me which one I'm gonna go to. My oldest son, he told me, and he was like, Mom, it's this one. And he was like, Mom, I heard God, he said it's this one. Apply for this one. So I did. And we got approved. And then we moved in, right? Good. That's two. Actually, that's all three, right? Because I had got the job first. We had been here, it was August, and I started applying to like several jobs. And I got to the point where I was like, Lord, if all I'm going to do is share my testimony, then that's it. Because everybody asked me what brought me to Texas, and I said Jesus, and then it's like, oh God, in the middle of a pandemic, he told me to leave, so I left. So then people began to stop asking me questions about the job and just started asking me about my faith and what made me do it, and did I really believe it was really God who said it. And so I began to just talk to them about where I was and where God told me to go, and the fact that I didn't know where I was going to work. I didn't know what me and my kids were going to do. I knew one or two things that I was supposed to have done, and I started doing that. But even those plans got changed, right? So I had to adjust and reevaluate and do different things. But in this whole time, I'm still going off of a word. And then he told me three things. Those were words, but I'm still trusting him. Like, God, I don't know when it's going to happen, but you said, I will remind him here and there, like, Lord, you said this thing was going to happen and this was going to happen if I did X, Y, and Z. Lord, I've done that, but he makes good on his promise. But again, all I had was a word. But my life, people that didn't know me, that heard my story, would come and be like, oh my God, I don't know if I would be able to do that. And then as my story was being told to other people, I began to know, my one girlfriend was like, so you just got up and left because God said so? I did, and she was like, oh my God. And she called and she would check up on me and see how I'm doing. And my cousin would call me and check up on me and see how I'm doing. I would talk to my family, and they would ask, well, did you find work yet? Nope. Still trusting God, how's everything going? Good. You understand? And so it came to a point where me and my kids needed to pay to stay where we were at in the hotel. You had to pay every 28 days. And I remember having $75 to my name. I said, God, you brought me here. So you have to make good on your word because you brought me here. Me and my kids. I don't have no job. I have no money. I have $75 to my name. And me and my kids have to pay tomorrow to stay here. And that's all I got. And my bill was $14.50 and I have $75. I said, but God, you're going to provide and make a way. So I had a ram in a bush. He gave me the ram. A pastor who knew I was moving down here and had been here, and I kept in contact with. She called me and she was talking to me and asked me how things was. And I had just told her, just having a conversation, and I wasn't expecting anything. I was just having a conversation. But what I did ask was that she touch and agree with me about what I was praying and believing God for, because that's what I did. And I heard God tell me to get up and go to church because it was Bible study. So I got up and I went to Bible study. And while we had just got out of prayer, I received a text. And that same pastor said, God told me to take care of your rent. How much do you need? And so I told her what I needed down to the dollar amount. That is all I expected to receive. But not only did I receive that, I went and I paid my rent at that time. And because I had been paying it and paying it for 28 days, which they considered a month, every time I got credit, y'all. I wasn't supposed to get any credit. So I wind up having $200 extra, $275 extra. Me and my kids were able to eat. My boys needed some stuff because they were going to after school doing different things. So the money was available. God took $75 and turned it into $1,450 that I needed. So when he gives you a word, you know it is not coming from you, and you know that it's coming from God, because that's the only person or the only one who could tell you this. Do it. Let your life be the living example. Trust him and move. He's not going to tell you everything at once, because we only know in part. But once we take the step, he'll take another with you, and another and another. And he will begin to do the things that he told you he would. You will see God moving in your life. You will see him moving in your life. You will see him moving in your life. Even when I came here to Houston, I was sitting in my car, and the Lord told me that it was time for me to move. I didn't know that my job wasn't going to transfer out here. I started asking, and they told me that they were able to create me a position. And then when I got here, it was a different story. I didn't get work right away here either. Different things has happened, transpired since I've been here. But again, it was another word to tell me to just go, because I have something for you to do there. So I need you to go there. So I left again. But it's some things that happened in this transition this time that was so much different from the last time. And I was like, well, God, how are you sending me here? And X, Y, and Z is happening. But remember, he said, did you trust me? You trusted me before. I need you to trust me again that same way. And so I was like, okay, God, we going. So me and my boys came down here another time off of another word. And so, and why I'm sitting here and different things has happened and transpired here. All I know is, regardless of what it looks like now, I'm holding on to the promises that he made to me and that he gave me, and different things that he has said for me and my boys. And he has showed up in a mighty way. And my boys have been exposed to some things that they wouldn't have been exposed to back where we used to live. And that's all because of God's goodness, right? So he knew what I needed. He know what my boys need. He knows better than I could ever know. And so I'm encouraging you and asking you at the same time, if all he's given you is a word, if all he has given you is a date, and he told you to remember this date or to mark this day down because something is going to happen on this date, I need you to remember it. Then write it down. If he gave you the word, write it down. Go in prayer and ask God to reveal more. But say yes to the word. Say yes to the vision. To give God a yes. And sometimes it's going to require for you to give him a yes again. And in the middle of the process, is going to require for you to give him a yes again. To you, your life might look a certain way, or you might feel that different things should have happened by now. And on the outside, people, they may look and be like, oh, that girl a little crazy. She might be doing something that I would have never done, but that's okay. Allow for God to show up in your life. Allow for your life to be a living testimony about the goodness of God and what he's able to do. Some people only talk about how God has saved them, or how they were sick and now they're healed, or they were on their deathbed and now they're healed, they're walking, they're doing. Those are huge testimonies, and those are great, mighty, powerful testimonies. But there is other times when God is just going to call for you to go off of a word or a date or a vision that he showed you, and you're supposed to walk this thing out in faith and trusting him and believing. Will you have questions along the way? Yes. Will you have some times where you may not understand? Yes. Is it going to require another level of faith? Yes. Is it going to require for you to spend some more time in his presence, in his space? Yes. To do some more reading of his word? Exactly. To walk it out? Yes, it's going to require for you to do all of that. But I'm encouraging you and asking you at the same time, just trust Him and believe and allow for your life to be a living example of how good God is and where He has brought you to where you are at now. If I looked back over my life in these last 3 years, I know that the Alencia area, I would have never got up and left Texas. If I knew that COVID was going to happen, I would have never got up and came to Texas in the middle of nothing, right? But I remember that I prayed to God and I said, Lord, if you provide an opportunity for better for me and my kids, I'm running. I said, God, I'll take it. Whatever it is, I'll go. And He provided. So I had to make good on my word too, just like I'm expecting for God to make good on His. I told Him that I would leave. He provided, and I left. And I left. Your story, your testimony may not be the same as mine. I'm not expecting it to, but I am expecting that you will get up and walk this thing out that we call faith, so that James 2:18 can be made evident in your life. You have a blessed day, and until the next time, I will see you again on Friday at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Bye-bye.